Destructive Deep Dive Podcast Show. Let's dive in.
Remember all those debates about DEI in schools and free speech on college campuses? Yeah, well, buckle up, because things just got a whole lot more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to take a deep dive today into 3 recent news stories from townhall.com, all published on February 28th, 2025.
Okay.
Each one tackles how politics and ideology are playing out in education and government. And let me tell you, there are some twists and turns you won't see coming.
Wow. What's fascinating to me is how these stories, though seemingly unconnected, like conservative student groups, when the Trump administration's cracked down on DEI programs, and even a congresswoman facing potential legal trouble.
Right.
They all point to the same tension,
Yeah.
This clash between deeply held beliefs and individual rights in our society.
It's like someone hit the shuffle button on current events.
Yeah.
But then you realize there's this common thread running through it all.
Right.
Let's start with that first story about Young Americans for Freedom, YAF,
Okay.
at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Now, you'd think a university known for science and engineering wouldn't be a hotbed for free speech controversy, right?
Right. You would assume a university would be all about, open dialogue and diverse viewpoints, but this situation throws a wrench in that assumption.
Big time.
Yeah.
The school blocked YAF from distributing pro-Israel flags during Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Oh, wow.
Their reasoning: they deemed the flags political.
Interesting.
But here's where things get really perplexing.
Okay.
At the same time, an administrator was openly displaying LGBTQ plus symbols, and the university had approved a Trans Day of Visibility event.
So it makes you wonder, what the university considers political and who gets to make that call.
Exactly.
It suggests a possible double standard at play, right?
It really doesn't. Hold on tight.
Okay.
Because it gets even more complicated.
Oh, boy.
The school also tried to prevent detransitioner Chloe Cole from speaking on campus. Now she's a young woman who's become a vocal critic of transitioning minors.
Right, a very hot topic.
A topic that's obviously generating a lot of heated debate.
Cole's situation is particularly interesting because she's speaking from personal experience about this controversial topic.
Yeah.
And the university attempted to silence her.
Right.
This isn't just about theoretical debates. It's about lived experiences being shut down.
Exactly. But YAF didn't back down. They lawyered up, filed a complaint with the Department of Education, and guess what?
What?
It worked. Chloe Cole is now cleared to speak at Embry-Riddle.
That's a significant victory for free speech, no doubt.
Right.
But it also highlights this concerning trend we're seeing on college campuses,
Yeah.
A growing intolerance for viewpoints that challenge prevailing progressive ideologies.
Right.
This raises the question, what happens to students and educators when certain perspectives become unacceptable? How does this impact the free exchange of ideas?
It's a question we need to be asking, especially considering our second story takes us from college campuses to K-12 education.
Okay.
With the Trump administration making a bold move against DEI programs.
This move is a prime example of how political agendas can directly impact educational policies. Imagine this.
Yeah.
The Trump administration gives schools a 2-week ultimatum. They say either get rid of DEI programs that they deem illegal or risk losing crucial federal funding.
And they didn't stop there. They actually launched an NDEI portal for the public to report schools for noncompliance.
That's a very aggressive strategy. Now, the administration argues these DEI programs are discriminatory and divisive, but critics see them as essential for inclusivity and addressing systemic inequalities.
Yeah.
It raises the question, is this an effective strategy?
Right.
What are the unintended consequences?
Yeah.
Could this exacerbate the very issues it aims to solve?
It's definitely a complex issue, especially since this story ties directly into the parental rights movement, which has been gaining traction. Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, a prominent parental rights group, praised this portal. She said it puts power back in the hands of parents.
This move from the Trump administration is like pouring gasoline on the fire of the parental rights debate.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. Parents concerned about what their children are learning now have a direct pipeline to the federal government to air their grievances.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run. Now, for our third story, we're shifting gears from education to immigration. But get this, it has a surprising connection to the previous story about DEI.
And it involves a high-profile figure, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, better known as AOC.
Right.
She found herself in hot water after hosting a webinar advising undocumented immigrants on how to avoid contact with ICE.
This is where things get really murky, right? What's the line between informing constituents and potentially obstructing law enforcement?
Well, former ICB Director Tom Homan certainly thinks she crossed a line. He called for a full-blown DOJ investigation, claiming AOC was actively interfering with law enforcement. It's not every day you see a congressperson facing potential legal repercussions for their actions.
And AOC didn't stay quiet. She fired back with a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, claiming she's being targeted for her political speech and demanding to know if she's under investigation.
This story highlights how political ideology shapes our perceptions of events.
Right.
Those who support AOC's views on immigration might see her actions as advocacy,
Right.
while her opponents might see it as a disregard for the law. It's a classic example of how our personal beliefs color our interpretation of facts.
It all comes back to that question of what constitutes acceptable discourse in our society. What are the limits of free speech, especially when dealing with sensitive issues like immigration?
It's a debate that's likely to rage on, particularly in our current political climate, which feels more divided than ever.
It feels like we're witnessing this clash, between those who champion absolute free speech and those who believe that certain types of speech can be harmful and should be restricted.
Yeah.
It's a tough conversation to have, but it's an important one, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And what strikes me is how these three stories, each playing out in different arenas, all connect back to the concept of power dynamics. You have students challenging the authority of their university.
Right.
A presidential administration wielding its power over educational institutions, and a congresswoman going head-to-head with law enforcement agencies.
It's almost like we're seeing this push and pull between established institutions and individuals who are demanding more autonomy and a greater say in how things are run.
Precisely. It's a reflection of a broader societal shift.
Yeah.
A questioning of traditional hierarchies and a push for greater individual empowerment. We're seeing this play out not just in politics and education, but in social movements and even in the workplace.
And with social media and the internet.
Right.
Individuals have more platforms than ever to voice their dissent and challenge the status quo. It's definitely shaking things up, wouldn't you say?
It is. It's a double-edged sword, though.
Right.
While increased access to information and communication can be incredibly empowering, it also brings new challenges.
Right.
We're now grappling with misinformation, online harassment, and a growing distrust in traditional institutions.
It's like we're navigating a whole new world with constantly changing rules, making it that much harder to address these complex issues.
Exactly. We're in uncharted territory, figuring things out as we go. But that's also what makes it so fascinating. We're witnessing rapid social and technological change, forcing us to re-examine our assumptions about power freedom and the role of government. Think about how much has changed in just the past few years.
I know, right?
And the pace of change is only accelerating.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah.
Let's zoom back in on each of these stories.
Okay.
And see if we can extract some key takeaways.
Sure.
Starting with that Embry-Riddle case.
Yeah.
What does YAF's victory tell us about the state of free speech on college campuses today?
Well, this case suggests that the fight for free speech on campuses is far from over. While there's a lot of talk about inclusivity and diversity, there's often less tolerance for viewpoints that challenge the prevailing progressive narrative. Conservative students in particular often feel pressured to self-censor or risk social isolation. It's a troubling trend, as universities should be marketplaces of ideas where students are exposed to diverse perspectives and encouraged to think critically.
It almost feels like certain topics have come off limits.
Yeah.
Like certain ideas are too dangerous or offensive to even discuss. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think there's a real concern that open debate is being stifled on some campuses. When certain viewpoints are silenced, it creates an echo chamber where existing beliefs are simply reinforced rather than challenged. This doesn't benefit anyone in the long run. It's not just about protecting the rights of those who hold unpopular views. It's about ensuring that everyone benefits from a robust and open exchange of ideas.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears to the Trump administration's crackdown on DEI programs. What are the potential implications of this policy, both intended and unintended?
Well, on the surface, the administration aims to eliminate what they perceive as discriminatory practices in education. They argue that some DEI programs can create a divisive us versus them mentality and potentially lead to reverse discrimination. Their goal seems to be to level the playing field and ensure equal opportunities for all students.
But there's also that counter-argument, right? That these programs are essential for addressing historical injustices and creating a more equitable learning environment for students from marginalized groups. Critics of the policy worried that dismantling these programs will only worsen existing inequalities. What are your thoughts on that perspective?
It's a valid concern. There's a real risk that dismantling DEI programs could have unintended negative consequences, particularly for students who rely on these programs for support and resources. It also raises questions about the role of the federal government in dictating educational policies. Should the government have this level of control over what's being taught in schools? It's a question that's sure to spark debate and legal challenges.
And then there's that NDEI portal. It feels like a really bold and potentially controversial move. Right. It could be seen as empowering parents to have more say in their children's education, but it could also be viewed as a tool for censorship, allowing people to report anything they disagree with, regardless of whether it's actually discriminatory.
That's the crux of the issue, isn't it? It all comes down to who gets to decide what's appropriate educational content and who has the authority to enforce those standards. This move toward greater government oversight of education is definitely going to have ripple effects, and it will be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
It seems like we're witnessing this tug-of-war between parental rights and academic freedom.
Yeah.
This story really highlights how intertwined those two concepts are. All right, let's move on to AOC and the controversy surrounding her advice to undocumented immigrants.
Okay.
This one seems to be hitting a nerve with a lot of people.
It's a highly sensitive topic that touches on anxieties about immigration, national security, and the rule of law. Some believe AOC's actions were reckless and potentially dangerous, arguing that she was encouraging people to break the law and undermine law enforcement efforts. They see this as a clear overstepping of her boundaries as a congresswoman.
But her supporters see it differently. Right? They argue she was simply providing information to her constituents, helping them understand their rights and navigate a complex legal system. They see her as a strong advocate for immigrants, especially those who are undocumented and may not be aware of their legal options.
Exactly. And this highlights the challenges of having a productive conversation about immigration in our current political climate. It seems like any attempt to discuss immigration policy quickly gets bogged down in accusations of racism, xenophobia, or open borders advocacy. It's hard to find that middle ground where we can have a nuanced and respectful dialogue.
It's almost like the conversation itself has become so politicized that it's impossible to separate fact from rhetoric. It makes it incredibly difficult to find common ground or reach any kind of consensus. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's essential to acknowledge that these are complex issues with valid concerns on all sides. Unfortunately, the debate often gets reduced to sound bites and slogans, making it difficult to have a nuanced discussion. It will take a lot of open-mindedness and good faith effort from everyone involved to find solutions that work for the majority of people.
We need to move beyond the shouting matches and start engaging with each other in a more thoughtful and constructive way. Otherwise, these issues will only become more divisive.
I completely agree. We need to remember that we're all part of the same society, and we all have a stake in creating a future that's just and equitable for everyone.
So where do we go from here? We've covered a lot of ground campus free speech battles, the government's push against DEI, and a congresswoman facing potential legal trouble. These seemingly separate stories all touch on the same core tensions, ideology, power, and acceptable discourse in today's society.
Yeah, it feels like we're all trying to find our footing on, shifting ground, navigating a world that's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
These stories serve as a powerful reminder that we have a role to play in shaping the future of our society, the future of our communities.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If we're all part of this ongoing conversation, what can we do as informed citizens to navigate these complex issues and contribute to a more constructive dialogue?
Well, it starts with self-awareness, recognizing our own biases and assumptions.
Right.
We all approach these topics with unique experiences and perspectives, and acknowledging that is crucial for meaningful engagement. And it's not just about understanding our own biases, it's about actively listening to and engaging with those who hold different views, especially when we find those views challenging or even offensive.
Yeah, it's easy to stay within our own echo chambers.
Right.
Surrounded by people who share our opinions.
Exactly.
But that doesn't really challenge us to grow or expand our understanding of the world.
Exactly. Stepping outside of our comfort zones and engaging in respectful dialogue, even when it's difficult, is essential. And we have to be open to changing our minds when presented with new information or different perspectives. It's not about winning an argument or proving someone wrong. It's about seeking understanding and finding common ground.
That takes a lot of humility and open-mindedness. It's about remembering that we're all part of the same society, all sharing this journey together.
Precisely. We all have a stake in creating a future that's fair and equitable for everyone. These stories we've unpacked today, they demonstrate the high stakes of these debates. The battle lines are being drawn on multiple fronts, and it can feel overwhelming.
It can. But, even with all the conflict and disagreement, the fact that people are engaging in these debates, even passionately, it gives me a sliver of hope. It shows that people care, that they're willing to fight for what they believe in.
Apathy is far more dangerous than disagreement. As long as we're willing to engage in these conversations, even when they're difficult, there's potential for progress. Who knows, maybe through open and honest dialogue, we can begin to bridge these divides and find solutions that benefit everyone.
That's a great point. We've explored some weighty issues today, from campus free speech and DEI programs to the complexities of immigration. These are all forces shaping our society, and it's our responsibility as informed citizens to stay engaged, to challenge our own assumptions, and to work towards a more just and equitable world.
So as you go about your day, consider how these stories connect with your own experiences. What role do you envision yourself playing in shaping the future of education, of politics, of individual rights? It's something worth reflecting on.
You Democrats, bloated bureaucrats, like a New York sewer rat.